I think freedom is this understanding of this interplay of destiny is the free will of the higher self. Understanding that you chose it all. There's nothing here that is victimizing you. You chose to experience this. And I know this is difficult for people that are like, wait a minute, are you saying that children chose bad things that happened to them? Are you saying that all of these things? What I'm saying to you is that it is your you inverse. It's not another person's you inverse, because you have unique eyes. Your perception is making your own universe, and that universe is all a reflection of what's inside of you. The journey that you think you're on in the outside world is really just a journey within you. When you start to realize you're in the game, all the time you don't realize you're in the game, you realize was sort of hellish, because it's like suffering with no meaning. Suffering with no meaning is like math with no meaning. Math with no meaning is just suffering. Math with meaning is divine communication. Suffering with meaning is the gold of alchemy. So what do I mean by this? So our entire musical scale is separated out with the square root of 2. And when people ask me about this whole thing with Terrence Howard, they're like, okay, what do you think about 1 × 1 = 2? And I'm like, well, it cannot be. Because an entire scale of music starts with unison value of 1, and the next note is the 12/1 root of 2. And the next note, it would be da, 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 just like that of a scale. And you multiply it by the unison value. The next note would be the 12/2 root of 2. And the next note would be 12/3 root of 2. And the next note would be 12/4 root of 2, all the way up to 12. You have 12 notes in the scale. And the middle of it is the diminished fifth, which is the square root of 2, or the 12/6 root of 2, the square root of 2. And what I realized is that we think of duality, and duality is related to dividing something into 2, right? So that which was unified becomes 2. So you could think of a circle that has a split, looks like a phi symbol for the golden ratio. Okay, so we can sort of grok that and understand the separation of 2. And so part of the reason why people get confused, and why Terrence, I think, was confused, is people would say, like Terrence did to me, well, $1 multiplied by $1 can't be just $1. It should be something more than $1. And I'm like, no, think of it like this. 2 times 3 is 2 groupings of 3.
Right.
Equals 6. So first of all, this is a massive indictment on the poor quality of our education system, that people are literally having to retrace the steps to this basic level. But I am happy that Terrence is actually forcing everybody to rethink assumptions.
It's interesting he used the dollar metaphor, though, because I think that was actually, fiat currencies, a contributor to the poorness of our education system.
That's a whole nother
can of worms, but also it's true what you're saying. It's not $1 grouping of $1. It's one group of $1 is one.
Yes. So this is where I was like, okay, let's look at the scale. If 1 × 1 = 2, then there would be no notes of differentiation between the first octave and the second octave.
Yeah.
You couldn't have it.
Right.
Period. But there's a deeper metaphor here. Math with meaning. Spirituality is all about applying the meaning, and it's entirely subjective. So I started thinking, okay, if the number 2 is duality, and cells divide. That's another thing that they use as their example. They're like, well, cells divide and they multiply. They said, no, cells multiply. No, cells don't multiply. They actually divide.
Yeah.
Right? So 1 divides into 2.
Right.
Equal,
0.5, 0.5.
And then 4, and then 8. It's 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64 is the binary math, that basically populates the entire world around us.
Yeah.
And the truth of it is that the 1 is just divided, and 1 can divide infinitely. We can all understand that. You could cut a piece of pie into infinitely small pieces, right? So now if we think about what would be the essence of duality then, from a numerical perspective, would it not be the square root, the number that from itself can create itself? So because you have enough information in the number 2 to just take the function of the square root of 2. 2 numbers that would multiply by each other have the same numerical value, and that multiplication result comes out to be 2. And that's 1.4142, and it's an infinite number. It's infinite because it's the essence of. So you could say it's like the spirit of 2. It's infinite. And then you multiply the spirit by itself and it creates matter. You could say that 2 is a compression from a mathematical computer science perspective of the infinite nature of 2-ness, which is the square root of 2. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the essence of
is that
duality.
Euler's number? The 1.1?
1.4142.
That is Euler's number then.
No, Euler's number is 2.718.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So what is that number named? Does that have a name or is that just square root of 2?
The square root of 2 is just square root of 2, 1.4142.
Okay.
So if we take that square root of 2 number, and we know that, okay, this is the essence of duality, which then leads to the essence of suffering, the essence of scarcity, the essence of all separation, the essence of everything that nobody likes about being here on this game called Earth, right? If we take that and we add it to the square root of 3, and when we think of the number 3, we think about religious connotations sometimes. I think of the Trinity.
Of course.
Think of a triangle. The triangle that's got the eye inside of it in Freemasonry.
Yeah.
Right? So the Trinity has its essence, and its essence would therefore be the square root of 3. So, okay, what is the square root of 2 plus the square root of 3? It's 3.146. It's really close to pi. That's kind of amazing. So that means that I have a diameter of 1, and the circumference is the sum of the square root of 2 and the square root of 3. It's really beautiful. I mentioned that earlier. But I looked at it one step further and said, okay, suffering that we personify in the number 2 and the square root of 2, when added to the context of the divine, the Trinity, and its essence, comes full circle. Suffering has meaning. So what degree of the circle would be represented by the component that was the square root of 2 versus the component that is the square root of 3? And how many degrees is that? So I ran the numbers on that. And guess what it comes out to? By the way, the square root of 2 looks like the symbol for Saturn. Literally looks like the symbol for Saturn. Saturn has a symbol in alchemy that looks like the square root of 2. And it's represented by the metal lead. Lead. So now we're going to look to see how many degrees of the circle is associated with the square root of 2 versus the square root of 3. And guess what it is? It's 161.816 degrees. And if you recognize that number, it's the most important number of all self-generating number systems. All plants, all DNA, everything is based on 1618. And not only is this 1618, but it has its palindrome embedded in its mantissa, in its tail. So it's 161.816, the same number, just in reverse, 618. And 1 over 1.618 equals 0.618. It's the only number that does that. So same number, exactly the same mantissa, except that it's got 1 in the front. This is what defines black holes and white holes. So what this is actually doing is it's taking the pain of your suffering, the difficulty of scarcity, and all the challenge that we face with it, and applying the meaning to it and saying, okay, when you look at suffering by itself, it's just suffering. When you understand that it's taking you through an alchemical journey to find your divine soul self, then it comes full circle for you. And that lead that was the square root of 2 becomes the golden number. Lead turns to gold. And it's a mathematical proof. When we understand that our suffering has a reason, it's not really suffering at all. It's just part of the game. And the real game is to remember why we chose what we chose and remember our own divinity within. That is the metaphor. You asked about metaphors earlier. That is the metaphor of this experience of difficulty and duality and challenge. And in this context, now, it doesn't matter what challenge you face, you are your avatar state. No matter what happens to you, it's like no fucks given. You find the beauty within every single experience, and then you fall in love with this world as it is.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.